I was born in a family. I was the second child, but the only living child. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I guess, miracles seemed to start happening in my life. At first I didn't think that much about it, but we used to go down to a river and occasionally to go swimming. It was a shallow, slow-moving river. What I didn't know, and I guess my parents weren't too aware of, is that there were little potholes in the river. And so one day, as they were busy visiting with friends on the riverbank, and I was just wading in the water around my knee depth, suddenly I disappeared. And that they weren't watching. They, as far as they knew, I was in the shallows, and they would just look over every once in a while. But I had stepped into one of these potholes, and it was so deep that I couldn't reach the top of the water. And so I was flailing underwater, and I can just vaguely remember the fear of it, and there was nothing I could do. When suddenly a hand just reached down and grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back up out of the water and set me up on the shore. And it was some gentleman that I did not know, and it was a strange feeling. And then I turned and looked, and my parents still were not aware that I had gone under. Then when I turned back to the gentleman that had pulled me up, there was no one there. So my assumption years later was that that was an angel that saved my life at that moment. From that point on, I have had so many different experiences. When I was 18 years old, I had a tumor. First pain I'd ever had in my ear. When I was, I think about 7, 8 years old, my sister had punctured one eardrum, my right eardrum, with a cuticle stick, playing doctor. And but this was in my left ear, and it was just really severe. When the doctor finally got there and looked at it, and he told me, he says, "You've got a ruptured eardrum," he says, "but it's complicated." He said, "You need to see a specialist." So I went the next week to a specialist, and when he looked into my ear, my good ear, he said, "Everything's fine here." And he looked into the ear that was causing me so much pain. He was not in any fashion a Christian, because he backed up and he started cursing, and I thought, well, this is great bedside manner, and told me that I had a cholesteatoma. And he said he took some of his instruments and was playing in my ear, trying to prod it and so forth. And he looked at me and he said, "This thing's been growing for about 5 years." And he said, "If you don't have surgery, then in the next 5 years you'll lose your hearing. Eventually you'll lose your eyesight, and you'll die. It's that simple." But he said the surgery for this is, it's a major surgery. He says they go in and they just make an incision behind the ear, they fold it over on your face, and they go in, they dig out the tumor, and then they sew everything back. And he said, "Now, this is going to change your life, because you won't be able to get any water in your ear, you won't be able to handle pressure changes, you will be somewhat debilitated, you won't be able to be around loud noises." Got slammed really hard, and at 18 years old, noise is very much a part of your life. So they took me and put me in a sound booth, and my hearing in my affected ear. It was 60% diminished. So they scheduled me for surgery. The following week, I went back to camp meeting. That following weekend, I went back to camp meeting and told some friends about what was going on with the diagnosis. And the friends and church members began to pray for me. Well, then the following Sabbath, there was a visiting elder in church, and they asked me if I would be interested in being anointed. Well, I hadn't considered it, but I was open to anything. So we went back in a back room after church, and all knelt down, and I was anointed, prayed over. And afterwards, I got up, and nothing was changed. I still had a severe earache. Then we went home. We had lunch. Well, after lunch, as I was prone to do after eating a big meal, I lay down on the couch to just relax for a few minutes. My mother said for the next 3 hours I slept deeper than she'd ever seen me sleep. I didn't move, didn't flinch at all. And there were people in the living room playing piano and singing songs and talking and visiting. I just lay there. But I did, and she woke me up in time for supper. And when I woke up, there was this loud ringing sensation in my ear. It was just a high-pitched ringing that just kept going and going, and I thought it was going to drive me insane. It was just so loud. Nothing made it change. It just continued. So I finally got that evening. I went into a fitful sleep. The next morning I got up and I went to work and worked all day. And even in this propeller reconditioning shop with all the noise going on in there, the banging, the surface grinders, this loud pitch was louder than all of that. So at the end of work, I managed to get the phone number for my physician in his home. And I called him, and he told me, he said, Lee, he says, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. And he says, I'll be gone for a week. And I think I was scheduled for surgery in 2 weeks. And he said, but before I go, I'm going to make some rounds. He said, I'll stop by stop by the office if you'll be there. So I said, I'll be there. So I was there waiting on him when he came in, and he took me into the examination room. He looked at my good ear and he said, everything looks fine here. And then he went around to the other ear. And he looked in there and he said, And I thought, well, that's better than what I'd heard before. And so he went over and he got his little vacuum to stick in my ear and a probe. And he stuck it in there, and I heard the stuff getting sucked into the vacuum. It was like, thump, thump, thump. And he turned it off, and he backed up, and he looked at me, and he said, young man, you've healed yourself. And I said, praise the Lord. He said, you can praise whoever you want. He says, but I've never seen anything like this. He said, your tumor was advanced by 5 years. And he said, when I just looked in there, it was all shriveled up and laying in the bottom of the ear canal. He said, and the scar tissue, it looks like it's 2 months old. He said, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. And so I was ecstatic. I was praising the Lord. Wow, I couldn't imagine, because my faith wasn't that strong. I was willing to be anointed, but I didn't really anticipate anything happening. And so he said, well, let's check your hearing. They put me in the sound booth. My hearing was better in that ear than it was in the good ear. And he was just, wow. It was so remarkable. My mother was a nurse in the hospital. She saw him some weeks later and mentioned that she was my mother. And he said, strangest thing. I've never seen anything like that. And so he said, but it was definitely gone. I mean, it just fallen away. He said the tumor was just shriveled up into small pea size and just laying in the bottom.